Let's continue working on our project here, and let's continue with this link. At the moment, it looks a bit boring, and I would like to have that link look like a button. Now, we'll also use a button in some other places of our project, and therefore, instead of styling it here in the event item component, I'll add a new component, which we can then reuse, which I'll add in a new folder, which I'll name UI for user interface. And in there, I'll add a button.js file to create a button component in there, which sets up this button so that we have a reusable button. For this, in this button.js file, we create a button component like this, a functional component, which we of course also export. And then in here, I will return a link. And for this, we need to import link from next link. And that link should of course hold a text which is passed in from outside, so between the opening and closing tags of our button component. Hence, we can use props children here. And of course, it should also lead somewhere, and I expect to get a link prop on this button, which holds the actual link we want to go to, and set this as a value for the ref prop here. Now we got this button component. Attached, you now find this button.module.css file with some styles for this button. And just as before, to apply them, we now need to import classes from /button.module.css. And then to add those classes here, we need to actually add an element inside of the link component. We need to add an anchor tag element. And then on this anchor tag element, we can set the class name and set this to classes.button. Now, if we don't add the anchor tag, then the link automatically renders an anchor tag under the hood. An anchor tag where it basically controls what happens when that link is clicked though, so that we don't send a request for a new file, but instead it captures that request and loads a new page with JavaScript only. But if you want to apply custom styling, then you need to add that anchor tag on your own. And the link component will basically detect that there now is an anchor tag inside of it, and it will no longer render its own anchor tag, but instead render yours, but then add all that functionality where it captures clicks on that link and so on for you. So it will add that functionality, that all works. We just add our own anchor tag to add classes. We don't, and that's important, we don't set the ref attribute on this anchor tag though. As I just said, that will be added automatically by the link component, which is wrapped around that. So we just set it up like this. And now we can use this button component in the event item component. Here, instead of this link, we can now use our own button. And of course, for that, make sure you also import button from the UI folder and the button file. And then here we can still say explore event. And now we set the link prop on the button component because that's what I'm expecting here. I'm expecting a link prop. And I set this here equal to the explore link, just as before. And of course, this button technically now isn't a button but a link, but it will look like a button, hence the component name. If you now save all files, you should have this button look here. Now, adding a button was one important thing. I also want to add a couple of icons to ensure that the event items we're rendering look a bit nicer. For this, I prepared some icons for you, some icon components which you find attached. To be precise, attached you find an icons zip file which you can extract into your components folder, so that you end up with a third folder in the components folder, this icons folder, which holds free JavaScript files, which hold React component functions, which return SVG icons. Now, these icons are not created by me. I'm just sharing them with you so that we don't have to write that code together. Instead, these are icons from heroicons.com. Here I picked this location marker icon, I picked the calendar icon, and this arrow right icon. These icons are taken from heroicons.com, and I just pre-created these components for you so that we don't have to write all that code together. But I just copied the JSX code from heroicons.com. It's super easy to do. You even get a button for that here, and I created these components. Now with these components added, we can go back to eventitem.js, and there I now got a couple of places where these icons should be inserted. For example, here in front of the time. There I want to render the date icon, so I'll add it here, and we now need to import it. We need to import date icon from, and then go up one level into icons, date icon like this. We can now also remove the link import, by the way, since we're not using the link component in this component anymore. So that's the date icon added. Above the address, I want to add the address icon like this. And for that, you of course also need to add the appropriate import. And we can also already import the arrow right icon from icons arrow right icon, because I will render that in my button. Here in this button, I don't just want to have this explore event text. Instead, this text should sit side by side to an icon. Hence, I'll wrap this text in a span and then add another span here. And in that second span, I'll render this arrow right icon, which I just imported. And this second span, important, also receives a class. It receives the icon class, like this. Again, if you save all files and you go back, you now should see these icons as part of these event cards here. And that is now the final look of the event items. We spent quite some time on them, but we will use them in a lot of different places of this application, and therefore that is of course something which I did want to make look good. Now let's work on the other pages, because thus far we never left the starting page. And we got more pages. For example, we got the page for a single event. And we can reach that page for a given event ID if we click those buttons, the Explore Event buttons. That sets the URL to /events/ID and loads the event detail page. So time to work on that. And of course, feel free to start working on that on your own. Output some event data there. In the next lecture, we're going to work on it together. And we're then also going to add some styles together, of course.